Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wall Street for Main Street podcast. Today's special guest will be Jason Stevens, the investment executive of Sprott Global Resource Investments. Jason, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me, John.
All right. First thing I want to get off to is generally when I look at people like David Morgan or Katusa, they always have a 5 Ps or David Morgan has 10 rules of silver investing. When you evaluate a stock, do you have something similar or just a couple of points you always look for immediately when evaluating a new stock?
So back, I want to say over 10, 15 years ago, Rick Rule came up with a list of 10 interrogating questions that you can pose to management teams. And these are the questions that we use internally to get the management of these companies to reveal all the dirty little secrets within the company and really delve into the value of the company and what the actual risks you are taking. So a lot of these questions revert back to liquidation value, management teams, what their expertise in is, and how they plan to make you money. So not only how they plan on making you money, but what are the main risks not to making you money? Do they have enough money to bridge you to the point where if you invest correctly, they answer the unanswered questions that will give you those astronomical returns that so many of the speculators in our business are looking for.
All right, that sounds pretty good. The 10 interrogating questions, that is a pretty good one.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your listeners are happy to email me at jstevens@sprottglobal.com, and we've actually made a natural resource guide with these interrogating questions. So if they'd like to email me, I will be happy to send that off to them. But they're interrogating questions, again, to kind of delve into each aspect of their business, which creates the risk and opportunity in the investment.
All right, that sounds great. I encourage everyone to get a list of that. I'll probably ask for one too. So, and first off, you're known as mainly, as you were talking about how you're really into water. And last time I interviewed Rick Rule, he was saying how he loves water and that's his favorite investment. He said it was more of a long-term thing, but right now we have a drought in California. Do you think it's now becoming a medium or possibly short-term now? And what makes you really bullish on water?
Well, what makes me the most bullish is knowing how inefficient politicians are at allocating scarce resources. And water being something that is scarce it seems like there's a drought here in Southern California or in the West altogether every 10 years. But as time goes on, we have less and less water. The water rights in the Colorado River are depleting to the point where we no longer, because we don't have functioning markets and municipalities control these water rights, they aren't properly allocated. The pricing mechanism for these things always work wonders when you start to use them. The best case for that was Australia had about, I want to say, over the last 10 years, they actually privatized a lot of their water rights, which helped them survive much of the droughts that they had seen over the last 2 centuries. So one of the things that I continually look for in these water companies is that they seem to be agricultural companies side by side. And so you have all these farmers who need water for their own business, but right now in this market, you have these urban interests that can pay top dollar, sometimes 25 to 50 times more for these water rights, but because of California law, they're not able to be sold to urban interests. Well, now that we have this drought, that might change. These farmers, and this is speculation on my part, but farmers have the ability to make a handsome profit and stop farming things like alfalfa in the middle of the most arid desert in the U.S. And then sending it off to Asian countries and things that just don't make economic sense if we had a true, I would say, more expensive water market for a lot of the interests here in California.
Yeah, and it always seems like the most, I guess, quote-unquote progressive, or the most government-controlled one is where the first droughts show up. It's sort of
absolutely. And I think one of the big things in the inflationary trifecta, as I think of it, food, water, and energy. Well, a lot of people see inflationary pressures in food and energy, and that's simply because government is always trying to take things that skew their own economic numbers, so they take it out of, CPI or core CPI. Well, one thing that we haven't really priced in terms of the agriculture market is what happens if water prices go up. Water prices go up, that's not only a huge input for agricultural interests, but it's also a huge input for energy interests as well, with stuff like fracking being so water intensive.
Yeah. Well, actually, I never even thought about it. When people go away, they always make sure they pack enough food. But the reality is people can't go 2 days without water. Storing enough water is always actually more important. So, this rise in water prices is really a big thing. And you also talked about agriculture. You wrote an article on food scarcity. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There's a number of reasons that food scarcity is currently, right now food scarcity hasn't become such an issue, but what we're seeing is real changes in how, not only is how food's produced, but where it's going to be produced. We have soil depletion, we have diet changes, especially in places that have the biggest growth expected in their population, so people moving from rice to beef. We have all these underlying pressures to food prices and then the resource intensive nature of producing the food. But at this point, we have declining ability to provide supply. And I think water is just one of those inputs that we just haven't seen. We haven't had the full impact of inflationary pressures on agriculture because water has been so cheap and almost a non-issue when it comes to agricultural production. One of the big things that I've focused on in my business is getting as close to the farmer as possible, because when I invest, I don't necessarily want to invest in a consumer staple or so a company that's branding food items. If I'm really trying to take advantage of what I think is an agricultural price spike, I want to get as close to the farmer, just as if you're investing in gold, you want to get a gold producer. So I want a food producer. I want a farmer. The problem I have right now is that, just like gold production, it's not what you would call from the outside a great business. It's not a high-margin business. When you look at the farmer, most farmers in the U.S. and Canada make no more than a 4% margin on their production. So one of the first things that we look for here at Sprott is larger margins. So that basically means we need to see a unique business model to ensure that there's enough room in those margins for investors.
All right. Yeah, that's one of the things I was always taught about: increased margin and cut costs when running a business. In terms of farming, You were talking about this food inflation. If this food inflation occurs within the next 2 to 3 years, right now the big trend is organic farming and low carbs. How do you think that would affect people's diets? Would people have to actually go away from those diets and get more cheaper food?
Well, so I think there's a couple ways that food gets cheaper, and one is the competitive nature. You've seen even companies like Monsanto started making organic food, even though they basically create all of the primary market products for GMO foods. So you've seen them doing a complete 180 because of people's dietary changes. And I think that's what's going to fuel things like grass-fed beef, pastured animals, local farms changing their farms from conventional farms to smaller, local, organic farms, simply because things change when there's margins involved. If there's the money to be made because dietary changes happen, the market's very good and nimble at providing to those, as long as the government stays out of the way and doesn't provide solace to, some of the multinational companies that have other interests in protecting seed technologies. Some of the, I think, getting off on a different path, the IP rights to things that I don't think were ever supposed to have IP rights or certain IP protections.
All right. So next topic I'd like to talk about is energy. Right now, what type of where do you see the future of energy, and what sectors are you looking at right now?
The other sectors, well, in terms of energy specifically, I would probably look at uranium. Uranium is something that has gotten a little visibility as of lately, simply because Japan just promoted the support for their energy sector, so their restarts are going to start happening, I think, as early as this year, and then they're even entertaining the idea of new reactors being built. So the utility uranium requirements that we see in terms of the demand side fall into deficit by 2016. At current prices, that means half of the producers today are creating losses on every single pound of uranium that they're producing. I think that looking out as far as 2019, which is only 5 years away, we are going to have significant structural shortfalls, which means either we're putting new projects into production or the lights are going off. Right now, we're also, with the decline of uranium prices down to $35 a pound, you are seeing no incentive for new uranium mines to go into production. At the same time, we have 70 nuclear reactors being built across the world. So there's a demand side that's growing and a supply that has no incentive of creating more. So I think the uranium side of things gives people, even though the investments that I've followed since the announcement out of Japan have moved up anywhere from 10 to 35% in the last, I want to say, 2 months. These things are continually looking for new exploration and development projects, which will bode well for their news releases, but at the same time, we have a market that is taking anywhere from 8 to 15 years to bring a greenfield project, uranium project, from their exploration phase to a production phase, to something where you're actually getting uranium out of the ground. So we're a long way from having I think, a stable supply of uranium coming up to the demand that's going to need to be met as little as 2-3 years away.
Yeah, one project, the Cigar Lake, that took roughly 7 years. I don't know if that's the norm, but if projects come on like that, they're not going to. Prices will have to come up to.
And I think it was actually more than 7 years. Sorry to interrupt again, but yeah, I do think it's over 7 years that Cigar Lake took, and it's funny, the Athabasca Basin seems to all have their troubles. All of the major high-grade deposits seem to be under lakes or near water, which creates other sorts of structural problems. So there's certainly challenges to bringing good deposits into production as well.
Yeah. And I have a question. Is there any other energy sector you like, or is it mainly uranium? Do you like, what's your views on oil and gas, I guess?
Both oil and gas are appealing, just you need to find the right investment. I think that the market is much better, much more efficient in oil and gas, and the hubs that we're seeing, we've seen natural gas prices bump up dramatically here in the last year and a half since their lows. I think we're going to continue to see pressures as one of your biggest inputs in some of the new oil projects is natural gas, because they're using it to fire flood or use other sorts of natural gas to actually produce oil, and that can also be said for the oil sands. But I think for the most part we're going to go forward, and we're going to see somewhat of a bound or a pattern just trading in between $80 to $120 in terms of oil and gas. The black swan events in terms of the geopolitics can always change those things, but I think for the most part we are pretty good in terms of the pricing and the volatility of oil and gas prices across the world.
All right, and just one other question is, right now what's going on with Russia, and obviously you know what's going on with Russia, I think anyone would know. How do you think that will affect the uranium markets and oil or gas?
Well, that's really going to hamstring Europe's options. They will need to look out from outside interests for their utility needs in fossil fuels, because obviously most of their needs come from Russian reserves or Russian production. I think that any kind of geopolitics disruption, especially by one of the largest fossil fuels producers, will create tension, and speculators will take markets up with the thought that any large disruption is going to be a problem for either their needs, their utility needs, or what they've become accustomed to and up until that point. So I think for the most part, it's going to be more on perception as opposed to reality. Just like we saw when the Middle East had been disrupted on a number of different fronts. Oil prices went up without any real disruption in the Straits of Hormuz. So it's really perception, but in the short term, any sort of fear or uncertainty is going to drive up speculation on the oil markets and natural gas markets.
Oh, okay. And last topic I would say is what Sprott's very famous for is precious metals. What do you think about gold and silver's most recent move since forming that what looks to be a double bottom in December? Precious metals are the #1 performing asset this year.
Going from the worst to the best is always nice for those who have invested in those precious metals, but we certainly see the tide changing, and I've read a few recent articles, like some very well-received investment banks saying how we are seeing similarities in ETF demand that reminds them of 2005 to 2008, which was a huge rally for precious metals. And I think what I'm seeing on this side is that we're seeing not only sovereign entities looking to get involved in precious metals, but we're also seeing investment banks that are undertaking what a number of large bought deals in small companies. So large compared to the size of these guys' market caps, not necessarily in terms of the investment bank's wallet size. But this is indicating to me that most of these investment banks are believing that we have put in a bottom. So the confidence that you need to see these, I think, more considerable rallies and sustained rallies is starting to come back. Whether or not that's true, we're going to have fits and starts, and none of these things happen too steadily. But we're certainly starting to see the makings of what could be a longer-term market. And the $200 increase since the bottom on gold prices is a nice start, but nothing goes up at this rate steadily. So I would expect, just like Adrian Day said on your show not too long ago, you're going to see fits and starts and pullbacks in a sustained rally. So that's what I'm telling my clients to be on the look for, is that look for the opportunities, but keep in mind that the tides have changed and the sentiment for a lot of these institutional buyers has changed.
And one last thing is, what I'm seeing is, it seems like, even though silver has risen some, it seems like gold is leading silver. Do you see that similar, or do you think it's right now just central bank demand for gold is there, but not for silver? So gold is rising, but that demand aspect can change.
I think it will change. It's whether or not right now the demand is coming from, like you said, either central banks or more specifically the Asian interests. So they are looking for, I think, a way to get out of U.S. dollar interests, and that is not so much looking at speculating on price interests or short-term price moves. So they're really looking to move towards an asset-backed economy, and I think it's not just gold, but looking at all resources. And I think when they go, the central banks look at gold, they're not really looking for short-term moves, and they have a very strategic plan of securing resources for the next 100 years, not necessarily like you and I might be looking at the next 5 to 10 years. So they're not really price specific, but they are looking for asset-backed concerns or controls, and I think that silver just doesn't. That volatility is going to work against them, and the fact that the supply of the market is not something that they're looking for. Or if they can't get their supply, that's going to hurt, or at least lag the market going forward. They can always email me at jstevens@sprotglobal.com, and they can also sign up for Sprott Spots, which is our internal newsletter that kind of compilates all of the internal knowledge of 170 people within the Sprott organization about natural resources. If people want to email me, and I can sign them up for that, and I also have a monthly newsletter that focuses on natural resources and what happens, or as much as I can say in one newsletter about what's happened in natural resources. So, John, I really appreciate the opportunity to address your listeners.